Hello everyone, today I will tell you about scary stories. First story. A young family lived in a small town surrounded by dense forest. Mother, father, and their little son Nikita. They lived in a cozy house near the edge of the forest. Nikita was a lively and inquisitive boy who always pleased his parents with his cheerful disposition. Once, on a foggy autumn evening, when the forest seemed especially mysterious, Nikita heard a strange rustle outside the window. He looked out into the darkness and saw a pair of sparkling eyes shining through the trees. This look seemed strange and alluring, and Nikita felt a strange attraction to it. Since then, every night mysterious eyes appeared outside Nikita's window. The boy began to come to the window more and more often to meet those eyes. His parents began to notice that he had become somehow quiet and aloof. They asked him what was happening to him, but he always answered that he was fine. However, over time, Nikita began to change. His cheerful nature gave way to a strange melancholy. He stopped playing with his friends and spent more and more time at the window, looking at the sparkling eyes. The parents were desperate and did not know what to do. One day, determined to find out what was going on, the mother followed Nikita to his room at night. She saw him talking to someone invisible at the window. Fear seized her as she realized that Nikita was talking to something supernatural, something that came from the dark depths of the forest. Mother tried to convince Nikita to stop his strange communication, but he refused to listen. He was mesmerized by the sparkling eyes, and his behavior became more and more strange and unpredictable. Every day, Nikita more and more turned into a shadow of his former self. He stopped eating, sleeping, and communicating with others. His parents fought for him, but it seems that his soul has already been consumed by what hides in the dark depths of the forest. The story about Nikita became a warning for the inhabitants of the town. People said that he was the victim of a sinister creature, something ancient and evil that hides in the dark thickets of the forest. And now everyone who hears a strange rustle at night looks out the window with horror, fearing that the sparkling eyes can deceive them and take their souls, just as they took the soul of little Nikita. Second story. In a quiet suburban area lived a family: mother, father, and their 10-year-old son Danny. Danny was an active and joyful boy, always full of energy. However, one evening after he returned from a walk, everything began to change. Danny went for his usual walk to the river, as he had done so many times. But this time he returned home, seemingly not the same as before. His eyes seemed somehow empty, his face expressed a strange indifference. He no longer smiled and showed no interest in games or talking with his parents. When his mother asked how his walk was, he replied in a monotone voice, "The walk was good." The parents felt that something was wrong, but could not understand what it was. Over the next few days, Danny continued to behave strangely. He spent a lot of time in his room, closed off from everyone. His drawings, which he used to do with such joy, became gloomy and ominous. He even began to show aggression, which was completely unlike him. The parents became more and more worried. They tried to talk to Danny, but he only answered in short, emotionless phrases. It was as if he had become something else, as if his true identity had disappeared. One night his mother woke up to a strange noise in Danny's room. She went there and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness. His eyes sparkled with a faint, greenish light, like someone else's light. "Danny, what's wrong with you?" cried the mother, coming closer in fright. But he paid no attention to her. She tried to catch his eye, but her eyes were empty and cold. The mother realized that something inhuman had captured her son. She began to read prayers and incantations aloud, hoping that this would help banish the sinister force. The room grew cold, and a dark presence filled the air. Suddenly, Danny began to scream heartrendingly, as if he was in incredible pain. His body began to contort, and mist began to come out of his mouth like smoke. The mother continued to read the prayers, and with each word the fog became more and more dense. Eventually the fog disappeared, and Danny collapsed onto the bed, out of breath. He swayed and fell back onto the pillow as if nothing had happened. His eyes were normal again, full of life and kindness. His mother hugged him, crying with relief. What happened was incredibly scary, and she was grateful that she was able to save her son from an unknown threat. Since that day, Danny has become more careful and closer to his parents, and they will never forget that terrible night when he returned from a walk, no longer the same boy he was before. Since that night, when Danny returned from a walk in such a strange state, the life of the family began to slowly return to normal. Parents tried to support the boy, spend more time with him, and he seemed to restore his former personality. However, terrible memories did not leave the family. Danny had recurring nightmares about the night he lost control of himself. These nightmares began to deeply affect his psychological state, and the parents decided to seek help from specialists. After several months of therapy, Danny began to talk about his feelings and visions of that night. He described as if something else had taken over his mind, as if he had become a hostage of an inhuman force. It was scary and incomprehensible, but specialists worked to help him understand what happened and overcome the trauma. As Danny figured out the puzzle of his memories, he began to realize that there was some kind of connection between him and that mysterious being. He described that he felt some kind of attraction to the forest, to the place where he was then, and that he could not restrain this desire, and therefore went there. Gradually, with the help of therapy and family support, Danny began to regain his confidence and hope. He realized that he was not to blame for what happened, and that he was able to overcome the inner fear. He also began to engage in creativity in order to express his emotions and experiences through art. Through the years, terrible events have become part of Danny's past. He was able to overcome dark memories and learn to live a fulfilling life. The family remained united and supportive near each other, and their experience served as a reminder of how the power of family love and professionals can help overcome even the most terrible trials. Third story. In a quiet town surrounded by dense forests, there lived a boy named Daniel. He was only 10 years old, and he has always been a curious child, ready to explore every corner of the world around him. Once, when the sun had already disappeared below the horizon, and the sky began to take on shades of dark lilac, Daniel decided to go on his most daring expedition. He headed deeper into the forest, where the branches of the trees formed ominous shadows and the bushes hid something mysterious. Step by step, he moved further and further, his heart beating faster with excitement and fear. Suddenly, between dense foliage and moss, he found an old, tattered doll. The doll was in a terrible state. Her eyes were gouged out, her clothes were torn, and her hair was covered with dust and dirt. The dark place in which she was found made it feel as if she had been thrown out or forgotten here for many years. But despite her sinister appearance, something about her caught Daniel's attention. He decided to take the doll with him, despite a vague premonition that it was carrying something sinister. Returning home, the boy began to spend time with the doll. At first, he thought that he simply liked to resume her appearance, but he soon noticed strange changes in his life. Every night when Daniel went to bed, the doll seemed to change its position. Sometimes she ended up on the floor, although the boy confidently remembered that he had laid her on the table. Her dark eyes seemed to follow him, giving him an eerie feeling that he was never alone. Over time, the boy began to hear whispers and knocks at night. He woke up in a cold sweat, feeling that something or someone was watching him. Soon, even stranger events began to occur. Objects moved by themselves. Invisible rustles filled his room, and his dreams became terrible nightmares. Daniel realized that the doll carries something sinister with it, that it brings dark forces into his life from the depths of the forest. Fear seized him completely, and he realized that he must get rid of this doll in order to save himself. He went back to the forest, to the very place where he found her, and threw the doll into a deep hole. After that, the strange events began to gradually subside. Daniel no longer heard whispers and knocks. His dreams became calmer, and life took on a normal course. But sometimes, when night fell and the forest engulfed everything around him, he still felt a gaze from the darkness, reminding him that the dark forces could always return if he was not careful. Over the years, Daniel tried to forget about this terrible story. He grew up, graduated from high school, went to university, got a job, and even started his own family. It seemed that the terrible dole from the forest was left behind, like a terrible dream that he left in the distant past. However, when he became a father and began to live with his family in a new house, the past began to remind of itself. He found an old box in the attic full of children's toys and things he hadn't seen in years. And among them, he found another doll, similar to the one he found in the forest. At first he was dumbfounded. He was sure he had gotten rid of her, but here she was in front of him, like proof that the past never completely disappears. He decided to get rid of the doll again, but this time he was more careful. He put it in a box, locked it up, and hid it in the farthest corner of the attic. In the beginning, everything was calm. Days and weeks passed without any strange events, but then familiar knocks and whispers began to repeat. Daniel began to doubt his sanity. He couldn't explain how the doll could have returned despite all his precautions. Fear began to seize him again, and he decided to find a way to solve the riddle of this doll. He began to explore his past, learn about the place where he found the first doll, and look for answers to his questions. Gradually, he began to reveal long-forgotten family secrets related to the forest and its scary stories. One evening, when he was sitting in his office, examining old notes and documents, he heard a soft sound. He turned around and saw that the doll was standing on the table, looking at him with its gloomy eyes. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He realized that he must confront his fears and unravel the mystery of this doll once and for all. Again remembering his childhood and the events associated with the doll, he began to connect all the pieces of the puzzle. He realized that the doll was not just an object, but a symbol of fears and hidden dark forces that haunted him. He realized that he himself had kept this fear in himself all these years, and only he could destroy his power. With a big resolution, he took the doll in his hands and went out into his backyard. Under the dark sky, he set fire to the doll, watching the fire devour her body. His fear, his dark memories, and the dark secrets associated with this doll vanished with the flames. Since then, Daniel no longer felt the persecution of dark forces. He realized that only by confronting his fears and revealing the secrets of the past, he could free himself from their power. All these events reminded him that real strength lies in facing your fears in the eye and overcoming them, even if it means going through the darkest corners of your soul. Fourth story. In a quiet country town, surrounded by dense forests, a gloomy river flowed. Its waters were black as pitch, and the branches of the trees hanging over the shore cast ominous shadows on its surface. The locals called it the Black River, and no one dared to approach its banks after sunset. The legend of the Black River said that the water of this river was cursed. Many years ago, the town was a place where life flourished and people prospered. But one day, a mysterious stranger appeared, promising wealth and power to those who would make a deal with the dark forces. The inhabitants of the city, captivated by the stranger's promises, agreed. They performed black rites and sacrifices on the banks of the Black River, plunging into the dark depths of magic. But their greed and immoderation led to tragedy. The water of the river began to change its color, and terrible moans and whispers of tormented souls were heard in the night. The inhabitants, who caught the waters of the river with their eyes, drowned in their sins and curses. Since then, the Black River has become a symbol of fear and horror for the townspeople. The locals talked about the evil spirits that hid in its waters, and about how even the most courageous disappeared after they set foot on its shores. Tales of some sinister creature waiting in the night to drag away those who dared to approach. In the evenings, when darkness enveloped the town, the locals heard strange sounds that came from the direction of the Black River. Something rustled among the thickets, pulled to itself, as if inviting to a terrible date with the darkness. People noticed shadows breaking out of the water, as if hands were reaching out towards them. No one could say for sure what was at the very bottom of the Black River, but everyone knew that she hid terrible secrets and dark secrets. Stories that someone dared to appear on its shores at night and return alive began to be considered just fairy tales. The town became a quiet and languid place where people preferred not to disturb the calm of the night and not be alone with the Black River. However, among the locals there was one young man named Eliot who did not believe in horror stories and legends. He was always bold and curious, ready to test the veracity of every story. More and more people began to consider him reckless, as he dared to come close to the Black River even at night. One day, on a stormy and dark night, Eliot decided to try his luck. Taking a lantern and a small weapon, he made his way to the banks of the Black River. The winds whistled in my ears, and the dark shadows seemed alive and moving. When he reached the water, his heart was beating so fast that it seemed like it would jump out of his chest. Eliot took a deep breath and slowly stepped into the water. The water was cold and inhospitable, like the breath of darkness itself. He looked down, trying to see anything below the surface, but the water was so dark that he could see nothing but his own reflection. Suddenly, he felt something touch his leg. He screamed and tried to pull his leg away, but something caught on it. He began to pull his leg with force, and the water parted, revealing what was hidden in its depths. Something terrible and unbelievable emerged from the darkness. It was a creature that looked more like a sea monster than anything earthly. His eyes were empty and black as night, and his body was covered in a shimmering oily liquid. It grabbed Eliot's arm and began to slowly lift him up. Fear gripped Eliot. He realized that he had met with something that had long remained in legends. Black River came to life, and now she wanted something back. The creature pulled him higher and higher, absorbing his life force. But at the last moment, when Eliot was about to pass out, his hand was freed from the creature's grip. He threw himself on the shore, gasping and exhausted. The water of the river swallowed the creature back into its darkness, and the water became calm, as if nothing had happened. Eliot was lying on the ground, with 3 fingerprints on his hand. His heart was still beating fast, but he realized that even the most daring research venture could face forces that surpassed human understanding. From then on, Eliot never approached the Black River again. It became a living reminder to the townspeople that some secrets are best left undiscovered, and some places untouched. The Black River has remained mysterious and terrifying, reminding everyone that the dark mysteries of the world may have a price not worth paying.